when you're watching it. Now, I like the idea of a killer clown trying to like terrorize children, you know what I mean? That's a great horror premise. But I what I like about this movie, I'm talking about the 2017 version, not the older adaptation, because this is a brilliant example of a horror movie being redone the right way. Like the best example I can give is I talked about Carrie, how the new Carrie, they did Carrie again and they made it like in the modern day, and I thought that was great and all. But to tell you the truth, in all honesty, like that adaptation didn't really go above and beyond the old 1970s version. You know what I'm saying? Like the original Carrie, the 1970s Carrie, is the creepy and horrifying one. And the modern one, I like it. They followed the story, they did an okay job with it, but I just feel like the original Carrie was a lot scarier. And now with this It movie, the adaptation goes above and beyond what the original one did. Now the original one, it's still scary, it still follows the scary tropes and whatnot, but it's not like horrifying. This one I feel like they did it justice where it was horrifying. The kids all acted great. They all did a great job with it. I felt like there wasn't a single person in this movie that just undersold the performance. I liked how they used practical effects with the makeup for Bill Skarsgård, who plays Pennywise. I just thought it was really cool that they made that choice, that they made that decision, and the mix of CGI and practical effects and the makeup and the physicality and all of it. I thought they just nailed it right on the head. It was horrifying, but it was also, in perfect creation of the work, of the book of what they were doing. And overall, this movie is just the right amount of like you root for the kids because you want the kids to win. It's sad enough because Georgie dies at the beginning. It's creepy because they have the killer clown there. I just feel like they hit all of the right notes. They hit it perfectly. They hit it right on the head, and they do the story justice, just the way you expect it to be done. And I remember when this movie came out in theaters in 2017, and it was like, it was kind of like the It movie. It was the main movie that everybody wanted to go watch or go see. And I wasn't really that big on horror at the time, or I mean, I was just kind of like, it's a killer clown. It's I didn't really get it. You know what I mean? So I wasn't as interested in it. But kids, people in high school and at that age, they were like, yeah, let's go see the It movie. Let's go see It. I want to go watch It. And I think it was just at the time, perfect time where it was like horror was getting more gory and bloody and just kind of like, I don't know, there was this kind of shift in the air where it was like horror movies were cool and people weren't as interested in watching, I guess, like, I don't know, maybe the superhero movies, or they just were looking for something to do as like a friend group, or I guess, or something like that. You know what I'm saying? It was just a really great movie, and rewatching it, I think to myself like, you know, obviously at the time, I don't think I would have been as scared about it back then, but now like rewatching it, I'm thinking to myself like, if I was a kid their age, I would have been having to deal with that clown. I would have been easily manipulated, killed, destroyed. You know what I mean? Like Pennywise would have had a hold on me for the rest of my life. But these kids, they all grouped together, and I thought that was the really cool part was they grouped together and they weren't really held back by fear of being losers. You know what I mean? They're already losers. That's why they're in the losers club. You know what I mean? They're already at the bottom. So what do they have to really fear at the end of the day? And that's why I kind of like seeing how Pennywise pokes at their fears and pokes at the worst parts about themselves, or tries to scare them and intimidate them because they're kids. And that's why he feasts on them. It's like it's easy to do it to them. And I don't know, man. I just like it. I just think that this is one of those horror movies where the The acting was on point. The special effects were really good. The story itself is it's a bit it's a bit on the nose, but I feel like it's a story that a lot of people can root behind. You know what I mean? A lot of people can understand it. They're like, oh yeah, that's this kind of movie, and you cheer for the kids and you want them to win. It's not kind of this what's it called? It isn't a movie where there's no hope. It's a movie where it's like these kids are coming of age and they're getting older and they're going to have to face real fears, and by doing so they'll become stronger and more united as friends, more united as people, and really understand one another. And I thought that was such a cool message behind the film. I thought that was a cool together they're strong. You know what I mean, if that makes sense. So uh yeah, I as I was watching the movie, I was like really interested in seeing like the behind the scenes production of it, because I'm always interested to see if like people actually get scared in horror movies, just to see if it's like, do you actually get freaked out? Do you actually get scared? And they always do this thing where it's like something gets released into the press where it's like, the actor was so shocked or so scary, or all the crew was terrified of their performance or whatnot. And I was just kind of like, show me in person. You know what I mean? It's like, if you're not shaking in your boots. But then I saw some behind the scenes footage, or like some behind the scenes reels of like, Bill Skarsgård working with the kids, or like trying to scare them, or just some of his audition work is really great. And then rewatch and then watching that and kind of seeing like the kids scared of Bill and like Pennywise, and like they didn't know what he was going to do and how freaky and terrifying he really was. And that was kind of the cool part about it for me, was that like those kids were actually like scared of him. And that's why their performances felt so authentic and so good when you watch it, and you kind of see how stunned they are. And there was a part in the movie where, I don't know, the kids were like all gathered around Pennywise, and they were all like driving him away, I guess, or like they were confronting him or whatnot, but they're terrified of him, right? And then Pennywise like escapes, he gets away, and then the main kid, darn, I forget his name. He's the one who's like George's older brother, I think, and he's kind of like, don't let him get away, but he says it under his breath, and he just like follows Pennywise, and I was just like, bro, what do you mean don't let him get away? You're like, I didn't see you being Mr. Tough Guy when he was in the room. Like, as soon as he runs away, he's just like, don't let him get away. And then he runs off. And I was just kind of like, what? No, dude. Like, I just didn't feel the power in that moment. But this movie is filled with great horror scenes, filled with great moments where Pennywise just messes with those kids and installs fear into them. He gets them freaked out. He gets them creeped out. He gets them scared. He gets them frightful of him. And I think that everybody there kind of, they start to figure out that like he's somebody that they can't mess with, or he's somebody that they're so afraid of that they don't even want to try to face him or to confront him or do anything with him. But the important part is that they're together in it. And it's different when they're facing him solo, right? He gets them isolated or by themselves. It's easy for him to terrorize or to scare or to like make them all so afraid of him when they're one by one, you know what I'm saying? But when they're all together, when they actually face him and fight him and beat him up and realize that with all of my friends behind me, I don't have to be afraid of you. I don't have to be scared of you. And that's the cool part, is that as long as you have a community or you have people behind you, nothing's really as scary as it seems. And so I like that. I like that about this movie. And there were plenty of times when I was watching it that it just felt like scene after scene after scene they were really capturing the horror the horror aspect of it. From the headless scene, you know what I mean, where he's chasing the kid, and then when he does that contortionist, like he's coming out of that refrigerator or whatever, that was creepy. That was a good moment. Or even the beginning when he first kills Georgie, he eats Georgie. It's so good, so iconic, and kind of the thing that starts it all. And then of course when he's just like terrorizing the other kids and like freaking them out and stuff, it's all the way great. I like the when he has all of the balloons and stuff. You know what I'm talking about? And he scares that one kid. Um, all of that was just so entertaining, and it just felt like back to back to back. They were creating so many great moments that the film just it just feels like you're never waiting for something. You know what I'm saying? How you like how like you wait for a big moment or a big jump scare or something to happen in a horror movie. Like the suspense is what's killing you, right? But then in actuality, the suspense never shows up and you're just like, what the heck is going on? You know what I'm saying? In this movie, it felt like because we already know the antagonist, we already know that Pennywise is the killer clown. He's the destructive force behind everything. It's not a mystery to see him on screen and be scary. It's more so like how he manipulates and how is he going to scare the next kid. You know what I'm saying? And that's the part that I really enjoyed. And overall, I mean, say what you want, but Bill Skarsgård stole the show. All of the kids were great, you know. And that's not to undermine their performances. I think that they definitely casted the right kids for it. But I don't feel like any of it would have worked without Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise. And I was watching the behind the scenes, like I said earlier, and he was in his audition. He was really good, but he said that like he didn't feel like he could get into the character or fully express it until he was in full costume and in full makeup and like the headwear and stuff. Once he was in full costume and he was like able to fully express himself or be the character, that's when he was kind of like able to figure out how Pennywise would move. You know what I mean? Because once he's in the costume and the clown getup, that's when he's able to like, oh, I'm Pennywise the clown. You know what I mean? Whereas without it and like in his plain clothes or whatever and like just regular clown makeup, he's not really. You can't get the full essence of who Pennywise is or how he moves and walks and talks and stuff. It's like the difference between playing like a woman, like a female character, right? Or like a woman. But then you have to like think of the time period. So if it's like modern day, then I think you could play it a lot more loosely, you know? But if it's a period piece like back in the day, like Bridgerton, then you have to walk a different kind of way, right? A lot more uptight with the corset on. And you can't fully express that without that stuff on. You know what I'm saying? You need the corset on to like tighten you up and make you stand taller or straighter, you know what I mean? Fix your posture or whatever. As opposed to like modern day when you're a little bit more slouched, you're a little bit more comfortable, you're wearing sweatpants. You know, you're not having to follow those kinds of rules. And so for him, it was just like the same thing. He needs to be in the outfit in order to fully to fully express himself. And I thought that was really I thought that made sense. That made a lot of sense for me. And then when you watch him in the scenes and they say that like he didn't really do a lot of stunt work or like have somebody else stand in for him because he was pretty athletic and he did a lot of the you know what I mean, the shaking of his head and the running and the jumping and like all of the crazy kind of like mannerisms or whatnot. He did it himself and he felt so exhausted, like take after take after take of doing it over and over and over again, or like when they do fight scenes, or like when he has to like chase or run or jump or crawl and do other stuff. Like it was all a part of the I think it was all a part of him really being there and him really being that character. Because if you give it to a stuntman, not that it isn't, possible or capable of doing it, obviously they'll get the physicality of it, but like they're not Bill Skarsgård, if that makes sense. Like you could put somebody in the it makeup and have them jump around and do crazy stunts or whatever, but you won't have the actor like actually like scaring, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like you actually need Bill Skarsgård there in order to scare everybody, in order to scare the kids and be the character, whatnot. You know. So then they'd have to make it a little more choppy. I think they'd have to make it the stunt double, chop it, or cut the scene, and then have Bill Skarsgård come in and do his lines. And they could have done that a few times. I think. I don't know what the stunt team was actually like, but it just shows the dedication that he was giving to this character, to Pennywise, and how that performance just translates through the screen, and it's just so creepy. And then mix that in combination with the CGI, the special effects, the makeup, the costuming, all of it together, just creating this, you know, this movie, this horrifying image, and uh these these moments where they're able to like fully convey what they're going for. Cause like when he was coming out of that refrigerator all like messed up and he's spinning his head around and his bones are breaking or like putting back in place and like he's getting all creepy. That's the kind of stuff that you need. Like Bill Skarsgård is in the refrigerator and he comes out, but he doesn't do all the contortionist stuff. Instead, they add that later on, and it just makes it even creepier. And then obviously when he's doing a bunch of other insane stuff, like with his mouth when he's about to devour and eat and stuff, and the fangs. The drool was real, as far as I know. Bill, he was actually like drooling, and I thought that was kind of like, yeah, that was a little gross, but at the same time, it's like, it's the scene. And yeah, I just liked it when the kids were like, I was so freaked out and I was so scared, and you could just feel like there was like a heavy tension for them. They were just like creeped out by him, and I liked that. I thought that definitely like, that just made the film feel more authentic to me, and it didn't feel like he was actually, it didn't feel like he was pulling back. It felt like he was really meant to play the role and he was giving it his all, and that's why the movie feels so good to me. And that's why I feel like a lot of other horror movies they're not able to give the same kind of passion that this movie has, or the same kind of performance. What else is there? Yeah, I really liked, I think my favorite character in this movie is it might be Richie or it might be Eddie, because Eddie gets terrorized in this movie, but Richie is the one who's afraid of clowns, but then he then embraces his fear. So I don't know. And then there's also the girl. I forget her name. Darn it. Is it? Let me look up the cast really quick, because I forget what they're. No, it's. They don't even show her name. Okay, well, Beverly? Is it Beverly? I think it's Beverly. Yeah, she was also really great in the movie. I always like it when they put, you know, they always give like some sort of a female representation in there, and I felt like she did a great job with it. I really thought she carried that part well. Um, yeah, Bill, Richie, Eddie, Ben was also really cool. Um, oh, the kid who played Georgie, that kid, when he came up again, when he was doing like you'll, I think it's You'll Float Too, when he starts going, You'll Float Too, You'll Float Too, You'll Float Too. I thought that was also a great moment. And I thought that once he got, taken by it, or by Pennywise, that was going to be it for him. But he came back, and they did some really great stuff with that. So I don't know. I thought that everybody did their part. Everybody did a great job with the story and showing how what's the right. It's just a it makes sense for them to do it in the time period that they did, right? I forget how what time this actually took place. It could have been the 80s. I think it was the 80s. Yeah. And so it was just kind of like what am I trying to say here? It makes sense to put it in the 80s when things were so typecast. You know what I mean? It's like you're either a jock or you're a nerd or you know what I mean? Like where they separate people and then they have like those people, those nerds, the losers, you know what I mean? It's just like people who you don't really care about, you don't really see all that much and I don't know, I thought that that's why that's also why this movie works because it's not weighed down by the modern, you know, the modernity of smartphones or everybody's like accepted and whatnot. You know what I mean? Like it works in that time period in the 80s because of the differences and the time period it is and stuff. So yeah, I think that more often than not you can see how modern horror movies don't really compare to old school like 80s and 70s horror movies. Like they just keep trying to replicate what they were doing. And they're, you know, and they're failing at it because I feel like modern times just aren't as scary anymore. You know, like it's scary in the 80s to be confronted by a killer clown because there was nothing like that like even existing, you know what I mean? But now in this modern era, you know, we're so desensitized to everything. We play scary video games. We're used to guns and violence and blood and like horrifying things. So nothing really. And then with guns and weapons and explosives and swords and knives and it's like you always have something to fight with. So nothing's really impossible to confront these days. Whereas back in the day, it was like, oh no, we got to figure out how we're gonna, you know, you had a baseball bat and a dream. You know what I'm saying? You didn't really know how you were gonna fight anything off, and especially kids, it's like, how are you gonna, you know, steal a gun or use a gun and you don't even know what you're doing and stuff like that. It's just crazy. So I think that for me at least, when I'm watching this movie, I tried to put myself in that time period and like who I would be in that moment. And if I'm honest with myself, I feel like I wouldn't really be a part of the losers club, but I also wouldn't be like a part of the jocks or like any of those people either. You know what I mean? Like I think it would just be a different kind of a thing for me or whatever, you know? Yeah. But anyways, when you're watching it, you got to be prepared for scene after scene after scene of just a new way of like messing with your mind or a new terrifying moment because even though you know Pennywise is there, the way he gets creative with it and just messing with you is always so it's so good the way that they do it. It's so good that the way that they mix together like his mannerisms and his creepy way of talking and his voice. His voice really sells it as well. And being a kid at that age, confronting whoever at that time, it just you really feel like what's it called? You feel connected to it, you know, you really feel like oh snap, if I was in this situation, I would react the same way or if something like that happened to me, I would also be like having to deal with those, you know, with those problems. And more often than not, I think that when you watch a horror movie, you're more so like, I would never do that. Like, that's so stupid. Why are they doing this instead of that? You know what I mean? You're so caught up on, I would not do that. I would do this, or I would do X, Y, and Z, or whatever. You know what I'm saying? You would kind of be like, this is so stupid. Why didn't he just run that way, or do this, or do that, right? And in this movie, you kind of feel like, no, the kids would act like this, or the kids are allowed to act stupid or do the wrong thing because they're kids. So when you have like teenagers, or like when you have I guess adults, or like 20-year-olds or whatever, right? Like, that are doing it, it just feels like, oh yeah, they should be smarter about things, but hey, I get it. It's just, that's the difference, and that's the reality of it all, is that sometimes you get taken out of the horror movie, or it starts to become a comedy when, you know, when what's happening isn't plausible. Now, a killer clown is not plausible, you know what I mean? It's not reality, but it's just kind of like, if that happened to you, yeah, you would be freaked out. Yeah, you would make stupid decisions. Yeah, you would be a dumb kid and you wouldn't make the right call or do the right thing, you know what I'm saying? And then sometimes the kids do make the right choice, like Bill, he runs upstairs, when Pennywise tries to come and get him. Stuff like that. So I don't know. I think that more often than not, this horror movie works because, one, it's a period piece. It's set in the 80s. They mix CGI and visual effects with special effects and makeup, practical. The casting was just spot on. The material itself of Pennywise the Clown and It itself, written by Stephen King, it just works, all of it together just made sense. And I think that, it's one of the more modern examples of good horror movies done right, So anytime I watch or I see like new horror movies that are like poking at the same ideas or doing the same old, I have to sit back and wonder, or think to myself, like, they're not doing it right because they just don't understand how to adapt it or to fit it into the modern day properly, So what was that one movie where it was like the phone was the bad guy, or like the horror aspect? It was like, was it like the dark phone, or something like that? That's the kind of stuff that nobody wants to see. It's like, we don't care about that. We just want, like, obviously you can have a horror movie with like a phone, you know what I mean? But like, oh, they called it the black phone? That's all right, whatever. But you get my point, is that the movie the movie like that just isn't. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it does work, but I just don't know, dude. So, anyways, in conclusion, I just want to say that when you're watching it, put yourselves in the kid's shoes. Put yourself in the time period. Really, like, put yourself in that headspace. And then imagine this killer clown you have no reference of. You have no idea as like ever existed or could ever exist. And they're coming after you, And then watch the movie. I think you'll end up like being a lot more shocked and surprised by the movie than I guess you usually would, or if you're not usually like scared by horror movies, you know what I mean? But anyways, yeah, I think it's a great horror movie. It's a great horror movie, and a true modern example of great adaptation, great casting, great script, great story, and we need more like it if we want the horror genre to really hold a lot of weight, because I feel like the horror genre is weighed down so much because of all of the garbage horror stuff that gets put out there. And they're going to keep making more. That's the thing, is that horror movies are still going to be made. Horror movies will forever be made. and you can go to the movies to watch them, but it's just like, at least make it good, at least make it horrifying, you know what I mean? So I guess we just have to wait until something else piques our interest, something else that like really knows what they're doing. I don't know. But anyways, thank you guys so much for listening. I'll talk to you guys all next time. Thank you.